You'd agree that John O'Keefe had a number of blunt impact injuries on his face, on his head, and his right arm.
Yes.
Besides his right arm, which we'll discuss in a second, taking his body from the neck down, he did not have any significant injuries.
From the neck down, not significant, no.
Let's take those one at a time. No injury whatsoever to his shoulders.
Correct.
No injuries whatsoever to his chest area, aside from sort of the CPR-related injuries that you discussed.
Yes, correct.
And that was in the sternum, is that right?
It was in the ribs, just adjacent to the sternum, yes.
Okay. No injuries to his torso, other than that.
No.
No injuries to his back.
No.
No injuries to his hips.
Correct.
No injuries to his pelvis.
Correct.
No injuries to his thighs.
To his...
Thighs.
No.
No injuries to his knees.
Correct.
No injuries to his shins.
Correct.
No injuries to his ankles.
Correct.
No injuries to his feet.
Correct.
From the neck down, he did not have a single broken bone, again, aside from those CPR-related injuries you discussed, correct?
That's correct.
Not a single fracture.
Other than CPR, correct.
And
well, my friends, for this vehicular homicide with the car ramming into this person, apparently, according to the state, and potentially hitting a curb and maybe dragging on the ground despite the lack of marks on the ground. And, you know, this violent altercation. There were no broken bones of any description. There were no fractures of any description that blow the neck down. And so, yeah, this is a very weird automobile accident. And the only indication was on his arm, between his elbow and his shoulder. So there was no injury to his shoulder, and there was no injury to his elbow, but the no man's land in between, where the lacerations is. And even then, there were no bruises or broken bones. This is a very strange automobile accident, it seems to me.
you spoke earlier about how the bumper was a little higher than on, say, a regular sedan, correct?
Correct.
And so usually in a pedestrian collision, you would see injuries to the knees. Is that right?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Depending on the kind of car, depending on the speed, depending on the height of the individual and the car, you might see injuries to their lower extremity. Yeah.
But in this case, you didn't see any injuries to his thighs, to his pelvis, anything even at the height of the bumper. Is that correct?
Correct. A very minor abrasion to the side of his right knee.
Yeah, again, not exactly convenient here. A bumper typically is not exactly that high on the human body, unless you got some sort of jacked up car or something. But yes, typically, if a bumper's going to run into a person, it's going to have a lower impact point than their upper arm. So a bit inconsistent with a vehicle accident. Yeah, that's a bit of a problem.
So surely you'd agree that John O'Keefe's injuries, or lack thereof, are inconsistent with having been struck by a 7,000-pound vehicle at 24 miles per hour and being projected 30 feet.
Yeah.
Objection.
Sustained. Break it down, ask it differently.
Yeah.
Would you agree that John O'Keefe's injuries, or lack thereof, are inconsistent with having been struck by a vehicle at 24 miles per hour?
I would say it's...
Say it. Say it.
Likely and unlikely at the same time.
Well, that's an interesting answer from the doctor, physician, ME. Would you say it's inconsistent? What I'd say is it's both likely and unlikely all at the same time. It's a Schrodinger's cat accident, people. I guess the power of belief will determine which way this particular coin flips. I guess.
Well, let me give you a hypothetical. Let's say the person were standing with their arm like this, and they were struck by the rear taillight of a vehicle at 24 miles per hour. Would you agree that his injuries are inconsistent with that scenario?
Objection.
Sustained.
Now, I honestly don't know why that was sustained just now, because that's the state's theory. She's just asking, okay, given what the state thinks happened, because that's what they've been arguing this entire time, right? 24 miles an hour, reverse, upper arm, all the rest of it. And so she just asked, okay, given a hypothetical, would these injuries be inconsistent with that hypothetical? And the state says objection, and the judge says sustained. But the problem is, it's not a hypothetical. It's not a hypothetical because it's the state's theory of the case, right? She's not making it up so much as the state is making it up. And it's the state's witness, or at least they're the one who called it. And so she can be asked that question because, well, she's an expert. She's merely being asked, is it consistent with the garbage the state is saying? And apparently we've got objections sustained for some reason. Also, even if it were a hypothetical, she is an expert. And so she should be able to opine on a hypothetical because she's an expert. But apparently we're sustaining objections now for some reason. I don't know.
Would you agree that John O'Keefe's injury to his arm are inconsistent with having been struck by a vehicle at 24 miles per hour?
I don't know. I am not a reconstruction expert. I'm not a biomechanics expert. I never personally inspected the car, so I can't offer an opinion on that.
Why not? Why can't you offer an opinion on that? I appreciate that you're not an accident reconstruction expert. You're a medical examiner. Your job is to do autopsies of bodies in which there is a unclear cause of death or otherwise suspicious or otherwise is authorized by law. That's your job. Your job is to examine the body and try to figure out what happened. And I would presume that you have seen things in your career. Many, 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 many things. And so you should be able to offer a pretty intelligent opinion about whether or not this is consistent with this kind of scenario. And she says, well, I'm not an expert reconstruction expert, so I don't know. I was like, yes, but have you seen bodies that have been hit by cars? I'm willing to bet the answer is yes. So could you, use a little bit of pattern recognition and reasoning expert and say whether or not this looks like all the other things that you looked at? Or is this thing not like the other things? Which category are we in? She ducks the question. Very annoying.
You did examine John O'Keefe's arm, correct?
Yes.
You observed no significant bruising,
Correct.
no fractures,
Correct.
and no broken bones.
Correct.
Yep, not a lot of damage.
Do you recognize that photograph?
I do.
And is that a photograph that was taken in connection with your autopsy?
Yes, it was taken at the time of autopsy after the face was cleaned.
Noted.
I'm sorry, after what?
The face was cleaned up.
Okay.
Are these the facial injuries that you were testifying to earlier?
Yes.
And could you kind of describe in that photograph what injuries you observed to his face?
The orbital ecchymosis on both eyes, the small laceration to the right eyelid, the abrasions on the nose.
And you testified that the injuries to his face were also the result of a blunt force trauma.
Correct.
So that's the laceration to the eye and the two abrasions that we see there on his nose.
Correct.
And you agree that those injuries don't just manifest out of nowhere, right?
Absolutely.
They have to originate from something.
Yes.
Would you agree that his injuries to his face are consistent with having been punched?
That is a possibility.
I would think so. Yeah, I mean, you're talking about lacerations to the face, and it's a blunt force object. So what's blunt force? Well, someone's hands are pretty blunt force, and the car presumably didn't hit his face, because if it did, well, we'd see a lot more damage presumably. And again, he landed in snow, so probably not so much with the snow causing it. So, okay, what else could it be? Is a little bit of a problem. And yes, it could also be consistent with a punch to the face. Yeah, that makes sense.
You described the open wound to the back of his head as a laceration, which is sort of a blunt force injury that's not the result of sharp force trauma. Is that right?
Yes.
And you'd agree that Mr. O'Keefe's head injury came from some sort of blow to the back of the head, whether it be an object or the ground. Is that right?
Yes.
Objection.
Hold on a minute.
And that injury could be the result of falling backward from a standing position onto concrete.
It's possible.
Yeah.
It could also be the result of being struck with a large object such as a baseball bat or a barbell.
It's possible.
I'd like to sort of circle back to those injuries to Mr. O'Keefe's arm. You testified that there were, again, no fractures, no broken bones, no significant contusions.
Yep.
Correct.
And these are sort of the linear wounds that you're referring to.
Yes.
And you testified that these also sort of appear in clusters or groups. You
Yes.
call them pattern abrasions, is that right?
Yes, I did.
And you'd
Yeah.
agree that, for example, road rash does not result in this type of discrete linear wounds.
It could, but not exactly like this.
So in other words, no. It could, but not like this. So in other words, no. These wounds are not from a road rash. Just say no.
Well, typically road rash covers sort of a large area of the skin. It would be a large abrasion. I mean, you've seen numerous cases of road rash in your
Yes.
career. And it doesn't look like that.
Correct.
There you go. That was the more honest answer. There you go. Yeah. No, road rash. I've looked at a lot of instances of road rash. Road rash does not look like this. These things are not from road rash. There you go. There's the more honest answer. Okay, great.
Blunt force trauma can include injuries from various objects, as you testified, including an animal paw, correct?
Correct.
And you'd agree that these discrete linear abrasions are inconsistent with having been struck by a smooth rear taillight at 24 miles per hour.
Objection.
Can you answer that, doctor?
I can't. By a
Okay.
smooth, no.
All right, next question.
Really? You can't answer that? Because I'm pretty sure I can. A smooth tail light could cause these scrapes? I don't think so, man. I'm pretty sure I can answer that one. Yeah, I'm not sure that was an honest answer, doctor.
As you testified earlier, you've indicated that based on the facts that were presented to you, you don't know what caused those significant scratches on Mr. O'Keefe's right arm.
I do not.
You testified on direct examination that you didn't see any sort of obvious signs of the fight because Mr. O'Keefe's fingernails were intact and you didn't observe any fractures on his hands. Is that right?
Correct.
But broken fingernails and fractured hands aren't the only observable signs of a fight. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
In fact, you noted a laceration over his eye.
Yes.
You noticed multiple lacerations on his nose.
Abrasions on his nose. Yes. Yes.
Multiple abrasions on his nose.
Correct.
You noticed a laceration to his tongue.
Yes.
You noted the contusions on the back of his right hand,
Correct.
the injury, the contusion to his left hand as well.
Correct.
And as you just testified, bruising on the back of hands may be consistent with defensive wounds.
It could be.
Yep.
So in fact, if you have a body that presents with a laceration to one of the brows, a laceration or abrasions to the nose, an egg over an eye, contusions and abrasions on the hands, and a laceration to the tongue, these injuries are consistent with a physical altercation, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
Are those injuries consistent with a physical altercation?
Objection.
Sustained.
Why?
Your Honor, may we approach?
Sure.
Why object? She's asking, are they consistent with this? She's an ME. She should be able to answer the question. If she doesn't know, she can say it, she doesn't know. But she should have enough expertise to be able to answer it, one would think. Why are you sustaining these objections, man? Is it that it's too damning for the state's case?
In other words, he could have suffered trauma to the face and then fallen and sustained the injury to the back of the head, correct?
That is possible. Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
In your expert medical opinion, is it possible for someone to get punched in the face hard enough to lose consciousness and fall backward?
Yeah.
Objection.
I'll allow it.
It's possible.
Again, I don't know why that objection. The question is it possible for someone to get punched hard enough in the face that they will fall down? I don't think you need a medical degree to be able to answer yes, that is possible. That happens quite a lot. Yeah. Well, my friends, it seems like for once we actually had a fairly honest expert from the government who was willing to say that, yes, there are a lot of possibilities, and no, she doesn't know a lot of things. And some of those things could be due to blunt force trauma, from example, for a fight. And she basically readily admitted these things. And some of her answers were fairly fair, although others maybe not as much. But she did, for example, admit that the striations on the arm could not be due from the blunt force trauma. That didn't make sense. Road rash, for example, that's not road rash. So she was willing to admit to that. So, hey, a mostly honest state witness. That's nice for a change, man. Man, if only all the state's witnesses were like this, we'd be off to a much, much better start.